and this key is actually shared between the sender and receiver of data. So the same shared key is used for both encrypting and decrypting the data. And some of the popular algorithms are, for example, the advanced encryption standard, and two-fish, blowfish, and other algorithms are there for symmetric key encryption. Next, we have the asymmetric encryption, or in this asymmetric encryption, we have the two keys, a public key and a private key. And these public and private keys are linked to each other. They are actually mathematically linked to each other. So one of the keys is used for encrypting the data. So you use the public key for encrypting the data, and the private key is used for decryption of the data. So let's say a user wants to send some data to another user. So user can encrypt the data with the public key of the receiver, and a receiver can decrypt the data with his or her private key. So that is asymmetric encryption. So in cloud environments, we can have different levels of encryption depending on at which level your data is encrypted. For example, you can encrypt your data right within your application. So once at the point where the data originates, right within your application, you can encrypt it, or you can encrypt it at the host level. So let's say your application is deployed on an application server, which can encrypt all the data at the host level, which is that is the file level. Or you can encrypt data at the network level. So once the data is transmitted over the network, some network encryption or a network appliance, specialized hardware appliance can be used for encrypting data at the network level. Or you can encrypt the data at the device level, which is where the data is stored. So then we can have multiple levels of encryption. Next, we have the area of securing data in motion. So why do we need to secure data in motion? Because we don't want any unauthorized party to have access to the data while it is being transmitted by the sender to the receiver. So when the data flows between a client and a server over an unsecure network, it is important that we ensure the confidentiality and also the integrity of data. So what is confidentiality? It means that your data shouldn't be accessed by any unauthorized party. And integrity means that while your data is being transmitted, it should not be changed by anyone. So any man in the middle should not be able to change your data while it is being transmitted. So to ensure data security of data in motion, we have mechanisms like transport layer security or secure socket layer. And For web applications, we use the HTTPS secure or HTTP over SSL for securing data in motion. And HTTPS works over SSL or TLS, and they use asymmetric cryptography is used for authentication. Symmetric encryption is used for confidentiality, and message authentication codes are used for ensuring integrity of data. Next, we have the area of key management. So, if you are encrypting your data with different keys, ensuring the proper management of keys is also very important. So, in a key management lifecycle, we have different phases. For example, the creation of a key, backup, deployment, monitoring, rotation, expiry, archival, and destruction of keys. So the keys should not be stored alongside the data, and we should have a separate data store for the keys. And the keys themselves should be encrypted with another key, and the keys should be automatically rotated after certain number of times they have been used, or after a certain duration. So we need proper key management. Next area is the area of auditing. So auditing is mandated by most security regulations. For example, if your application is storing healthcare data, so we have regulations like the HIPAA standard, which require complete audit logs to be maintained. So auditing requires that all the read and write access to the data should be logged. So every time a user is accessing certain data or writing some new data to your application, a complete log should be maintained. So what is the purpose of auditing? So in case of any security breach, you can identify which users were able to access the data, and you can further strengthen the security of your application to prevent such breaches in the future. So that was a brief introduction to various security mechanisms for cloud applications. Now I will discuss a framework which is called the AWS Well Architected Framework, which is published by the Amazon Web Services. And this framework, it is basically released by Amazon to help different cloud solution architects in designing and operating secure, reliable, cost-efficient applications in the cloud environments. So this well-architected framework, it has 5 pillars, and let's look at these 5 pillars. So firstly, we have the operational excellence pillar. So what is operational excellence? It includes the ability to run and monitor systems which deliver business value and improve the supporting processes. Next, we have the security pillar. So security pillar includes the ability to protect information systems and assets while delivering the business value through risk assessment and mitigation strategies. So within security pillar, we have various best practice areas like identity and access management, detective controls, infrastructure protection, data protection, and incident response. So we look at each of these areas in detail. The third pillar in the well architected framework is the reliability pillar. So, what is reliability? It is the ability of your system to recover from infrastructure or service disruptions, and also to dynamically acquire computing resources to meet demand and mitigate any disruptions. For example, misconfigurations or network issues. Next, we have the area of performance efficiency. So which includes the ability to use computing resources efficiently to meet the system requirements and maintain efficiency as the demand changes and as the technologies evolve. And the last area is the area of cost optimization. So we want to reduce the cost of our cloud applications. So it includes the ability to run systems to deliver business value at the lowest price point. So these are the 5 important pillars. And since the topic of this talk is security, so we'll look at the security pillar in bit more detail. So what are the design principles of the security pillar? So firstly, the well-architected framework, it recommends that we should implement the principle of least privilege, and we should centralize the privilege management. So what is least privilege? So let's say if you want users to access your application, they should be granted only the least amount of privileges required. So you should not open access to entire database or provide them unlimited access to your cloud storage. And they should be assigned only the least privileges possible so that they can interact with the application. Next, we should enable traceability and collect logs, metrics, and monitor all the changes within your cloud computing environment. So that is important for auditing purposes. You should maintain logs and metrics. Next, you should apply security at all the layers of your application. So let's say if you have a multi-tier application within a cloud, which has different tiers like the application tier, database tier, storage tier. So you want to secure different layers of the application and different tiers of the application. So next, we should protect the data in transit and at rest. And we should reduce or eliminate the need for direct access to data. So we should not allow users to directly access the database. Instead, we should uh, provide other mechanisms for sharing data with the users. And we should also have an instant management process in place and automate the detection and recovery of security events. So these are the basic design principles in the security pillar. So let's look at the best practice areas. So we have 5 best practice areas within the security pillar. So the first best practice area is identity and access management. And this area basically it highlights the importance of ensuring that only authorized and authenticated users can access your resources, and they should be able to do so only in the intended manner. So to manage your credentials and authentication, you should define the identity and access management requirements. You should secure your root user for your cloud environment. You should enforce multi-factor authentication. You should automate enforcements of different access controls. Where possible, you should use a centralized federation provider, and you should use federated identity management. You should enforce different password requirements. The credentials should be rotated regularly. Next, to control human access to the application, the access requirements for users should be clearly defined based on the job function of the user, and you should only implement the least privileges that should be granted to the users to reduce the risk of any unauthorized access. So you can also have programs or API access enabled to your applications, and to limit the or control the programmatic access, you should clearly define what are the access requirements for programmatic access, and only you should grant the least privileges for programmatic access. So that's the area of identity and access management. Next, we have the best practice area of detective controls. So this area highlights the importance of using detective controls to identify any potential threats or incidents which can happen. So what we should do to detect and investigate security events, we should define requirements for logs, metrics, alerts. We should configure service and application logging. The logs should be analyzed centrally, and we should automate the process of alerting on key indicators. So alerts should be put in place, and we should develop mechanisms for investigation processes. Next, to defend against the emerging security threats, we should always keep up to date with the various security best practices and security threats. So that's the area of detective controls. The third area is the area of infrastructure protection. So we should protect our infrastructure, including our network and compute resources. So to protect our network resources, we should clearly define our network protection requirements. We should limit the exposure of our network, and we should automate configuration management and network protection policies. And we should implement inspection and protection policies and control traffic at all layers of your network. Next, to secure and protect computing resources, we should define the requirements for compute protection, and we should scan and patch any vulnerabilities in your compute resources and automate configuration management, compute protection, and implement managed services. So where possible, you should use managed services instead of deploying your own databases. You can use managed databases in cloud environments, where the cloud provider takes care of patching and addressing all the security vulnerabilities. The next area is the area of data protection. So this area highlights the importance of protecting your data in transit and at rest. So to classify your data according to different levels of sensitivity, you should define the different data classification requirements, and you should protect your data according to the classification level. To protect the data at rest, we should define the data management and protection at rest requirements. We should enforce encryption of data at rest. We should enforce access control. Next, to protect the data at transit, within transit, we should clearly define the data protection in transit requirements. We should enforce encryption of data in transit using HTTPS, SSL, and TLS mechanisms. And we should automate detection of data leaks and authenticate network communications. So that's the area of data protection. And the last area is the area of incident response. So in case of any security incident, how we should be able to respond. So this area highlights the importance of putting in place processes to respond to and mitigate the impact of security incidents. So in case of any security incident, we should be able to respond to these incidents, and we should identify key personnel and external resources for incident response and provide them with the right tools so that appropriate responses can be made. So we looked at the AWS well-architected framework, and we looked at the various pillars within the well-architected framework, and then we discussed the area of security and the security pillar in more detail. And there are 5 best practice areas within the security pillar. So now let's look at one example of how we can apply security pillar and the well-architected framework to a real-world application. So let's say we have a multi-tier application deployed in a cloud environment. For example, a photo gallery application, in which users can log in and upload their photos and manage their photos online. So this is a typical multi-tier application, which involves an application server. So, for example, a reference application I've developed is using this Flask web framework, and it is deployed on an Amazon EC2 instance in the cloud. So that serves as the application server, and all the photos and files related to the applications, they are stored in the cloud storage, which is the Amazon S3 bucket. So S3 is the simple storage service in the Amazon cloud, and all the data related to the users is stored in a database. Either it can be a relational database like MySQL, or it can be a non-relational database like Amazon DynamoDB. So this is the typical example of a multi-tier application. We have the application tier, storage, and database tiers. So as we see, it is not very secure, and it is not very reliable and fault tolerant application. We have single point of failures in case our application server crashes, so the application would become unavailable. And we haven't secured our database and cloud storage. So how do we apply security pillar to this application? So firstly, we need to use some authentication and authorization service. So AWS provides a service called Amazon Cognito, which is a directory and authentication service. So using this service, we can authenticate users within our application. And also we want to limit the access of our application server to the cloud storage. So our application server should only be able to access data related to the particular application. It should not be able to access any other data. So for that purpose, we use an identity and access management role, which is assigned to the application server for accessing the S3 buckets where our photos are stored. So that's very basic example of applying some security approaches. But if you apply all the other techniques and all the other recommendations as recommended by AWS, we'll have an improved architecture like this. So what are the various techniques in this architecture we've employed? Let's look at these techniques. So firstly, here we have actually made this application highly available through the use of multiple instances which are placed under an auto-scaling group. So our application server, in the earlier architecture, we had a single application server, whereas in this improved architecture, we have multiple application servers. And these application servers are placed under an auto-scaling group. So which means that once the load on our application increases, a new application server instance will be automatically be launched within the auto-scaling group. Next, we have provisioned our application servers into different availability zones. So what is availability zone? Availability zone, you can think of availability zone like a data center. So AWS has different availability zones, and you should provision your application servers in different availability zone. In case one data center becomes unavailable, your application will still remain available because it has instances running in the other availability zone. Next, in the database tier, we have we have actually used multi AZ deployment or multi availability zone deployment. So our database is actually replicated in a different availability zone. So we have an active database instance and a standby instance. So in case the active instance becomes unavailable, we can switch on to the standby instance. Next, we have actually made this application completely stateless. So there is no state information maintained as such within the application servers. So all state information is stored outside the application servers within a state database. For example, Amazon DynamoDB can be used for maintaining the state information. So how this helps us? Because we can scale up our application tier and launch more and more number of instances as the load increases on our application, and there is nothing shared between these instances as such. All the state information, it is shared or stored in a separate status database. So these application servers have been made stateless. Next, we have used a caching tier, which is the Amazon Elastic Cache is used for improving the performance of our application. And we have used a content delivery network, which is the CDN, and Amazon offers this CloudFront CDN service. So this CDN service enables us to deliver our static and dynamic content using a global network of edge locations. So let's say your static files like JavaScript files, CSS files, photos which are stored on the S3 bucket, they are served through the CDN, which reduces the latency over the network because they are cached at the edge locations. Next, we have used a virtual private cloud topology, and we have different subnets within the VPC. So your database and your application servers, they are running within an isolated portion in the Amazon cloud. So they are not running alongside any other company's servers. So VPC or virtual private cloud is an isolated portion in the Amazon cloud dedicated for your organization. Finally, we have used load balancing. So when a request comes from the user, the load balancer balances the request using certain load balancing approach like round robin to different application servers. And finally, we have used the Route 53, which is the DNS for your domain. And using Route 53, you can actually enable different types of routing policies like latency routing or geolocation routing. So if users are requesting the application from a particular location, they may be routed to the nearest location where the application servers are deployed. So like this, if we apply the well-architected framework, we can make our application highly available, fault-tolerant, secure, and reliable by applying the various principles. So AWS or Amazon Web Services, it provides various security-related services. For example, the Identity and Access Management Service, a key management service, which is used for managing your encryption keys. Then we have a cloud HSM service, which allows you to provision a cluster of hardware security modules, and these are used for cryptographic operations and also for secure storage of cryptographic keys. And also a directory service is provided in Amazon, and you can support it supports different active directories like the Amazon Cloud Directory, Simple Active Directory, AD Connector, and Cognito user pools. So for further reading, you can refer to my books on cloud computing and cloud computing solutions architect, which talk about these areas in more detail with hands-on examples and exercises. So let me now actually show you this reference application and briefly go through this cloud computing environment in which this application has been deployed and various security processes which we can put in place. So if you log into your AWS or Amazon cloud, you can see a console like this. Within the AWS cloud, we have different security services. So if you go to the security area, so within the security, identity, and compliance area, we have different cloud security services. For example, we have the identity and access management service. Then we have a Cognito service, which is used for authentication within your application. We talked about the key management service, which allows you to manage your encryption key. We have the cloud hardware security modules, HSM service, and there are various other services which can be used by your application. So let's look at our reference application. So this is my reference photo gallery application. Currently, it is just running on a single application server, and it's using Amazon DynamoDB for storing all the data, and Cognito service for authenticating the users. So once a user logs into the application, a user can see all the photos which the user has uploaded. User can upload more photos from this application and view the details of each photo, and user can search for their photos uploaded. So this is a very basic reference application, and it is deployed on a single application server, and it's using the Amazon S3 service, which is your simple storage service. It's a cloud storage service where we can store different types of objects or files. So all the photos uploaded to the application are stored in this S3 bucket, and then all the data related to the application is stored within a NoSQL database, which is Amazon DynamoDB database. And as we can see that these are records of the photos which are uploaded, and this NoSQL database is storing all the records of the photos and the locations where they are stored within the cloud storage. And finally, we are using the Cognito service. Cognito services allows you to authenticate users. So like this, you can see various users within your application. You can define password policies and various other policies. You can reset or reset accounts of different users, and you can enable authentication service for your web and mobile applications using this Cognito service. So that's about our today's talk. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take your questions now.
If there are any questions participants may ask, you may put in the chat box or you may come to your mic and ask.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, shall we use which type of code we have to use, sir? Which platform we have to use? May I know, sir? To implement this code.
Okay, to implement this code, so you can refer to this GitHub repository. My GitHub repository has actually all the examples which I've actually provided in my book. And this photo gallery application, it's available in this GitHub repository. It's implemented using Python and Flask web framework. So it's just a reference application. So this is the source code. You can refer to the GitHub repo. It defines various routes and functions for different pages in your application, and how we can access and our cloud storage and how we upload data to our cloud storage. So all the source code is there in this GitHub repo.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So there's a question on can we clone your repository? Yes, yeah, definitely. The entire source code is available on the GitHub repository. You can clone it, you can modify it, you can use it for your teachings. And also, I've actually made available all the lecture slides for all my books are available on this book website, hands-on book series. So I have a series of books on cloud, IoT, big data, blockchain, and cloud solution architects. So if you go to the instructor section, you can request evaluation copies. You can download lecture slides for all these books. They are available. So the computing solution architect book is one of the latest books, and you can download the lecture slides and the entire source code. So there's a question on how to evaluate different cloud platforms from security point of view and which parameters should be used. So actually, if you look at the popular cloud platforms from Amazon, which is the AWS platform, from Microsoft, we have the Azure cloud platform, and Google has its Google Compute Cloud. These are the three leading cloud platforms, and they are actually they are comparable in terms of different services offered. And the security point of view, they offer comparable services like identity and access management service and key management service. All these platforms are offering very comparable services. So there is you cannot say that one platform is more secure than the other. Just that it depends on how you are securing your application. So if you refer to these guidelines for best practice areas, the AWS well architected framework, they have different best practices are defined for securing your applications. So it depends on how you are utilizing the services provided by the cloud platform. So there's a question on which security algorithms are used in cloud platform. So security algorithms, as I mentioned, we have authentication, authorization, securing data at rest, securing data in motion. So all these are the security uh, areas which you need to focus on. And if you go to the algorithms side, for example, for authentication and authorization, for authorization we can use OAuth algorithm, and for authentication we can use OpenID Connect, which is just a layer on top of the OAuth. And for securing data at rest, we use the symmetric encryption algorithms like advanced encryption standard. And for securing data within transit, we use the transport layer security or SSL which is used alongside HTTPS. So there's another question on I want to store my data on the cloud and which is better as per cost, security, and availability. I think to get started, I would recommend the Amazon AWS cloud. The reason being, AWS is a pioneer in this cloud technology. Cloud technology was actually pioneered by Amazon itself. So AWS is it is the most elaborate cloud platform. So if you look at the AWS cloud, we have numerous services, and they keep on adding more and more services. So we have compute services, containers, storage services, database services, network and content delivery services, machine learning, analytics, IoT, blockchain, you name it, you have it, everything. So like they even have a service for creating your own satellite ground stations. So that's the recent service they launched.
Arshdeep ji,
And the area of IoT, they have lots of services for IoT area and securing your IoT applications.
Arshdeep ji,
Yes, sir.
good morning. I am Dr. J. Babu speaking from Visakhapatnam.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. And presently we are in suffering with COVID pandemic, and are you organizing any this kind of cloud computing or IoT FTPs from your organization during this period?
Yes, sir. I have been like conducting different FTPs. Like institutes have been reaching out to me uh,
Yeah,
on FTPs related to IoT, blockchain.
yeah. And from your own organization, not from. We want to join. Just we want to join, and we want to hear lectures from your side after this also, after this
Okay.
program.
Yeah, so I do have actually like a couple of employees and interns working with me. I offer training programs also. But
Yeah,
mostly my work is more academic in nature. Like I'm focusing more on writing books. I'm helping instructors all over the world on creating their own courses. And for all of my books, actually, I've made available all the lecture slides, all the source code, and the lab materials, which
yeah.
help to the rapid adoption of these textbooks around the world.
Yeah. That's okay. But I am asking this kind of FDPs are do you organize during this time? I am asking.
Yes, sir. Yeah, definitely. During this last 2 months, I have actually held more than 10 FTPs
Oh, great.
on
Great, sir.
blockchain, IoT, cloud security, and other areas.
Yeah. Can you please provide the link in the chat box? Just we would like to, if anybody is having interest, they can also join.
Yeah,
Sir,
sure. Yeah,
definitely we can take the link from sir and then we will forward that to you.
sure, sure.
Definitely. You please do it. You
I
please
will
do it.
share in case of any upcoming program. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. We want to get connected with you. I
Sure,
am
sir.
professor of electronics and communication engineering, and from Visakhapatnam. Okay. We will invite you to our organization, sir, in future.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
So there's a question on. I have a question: which professional certification can help you better in your career? Yeah. So if you look at the AWS, it has various cloud certifications. So they have certifications for solution architects, for cloud security professionals, cloud practitioners, and also Google has its own certifications for cloud services. So these are actually one of the hottest certifications in this area. So AWS Certified Solution Architect certification is one of the most seeked certifications for by the employers, and if one has such certifications, it really helps in their career. Can we implement cloud security into mobile networks? Yeah, definitely. Mobile networks are utilizing a lot of cloud platforms, and the same security concepts apply to mobile networks as well. But again, like mobile networks like 4G, 5G, they have their own specialized protocols. But if you look at the backend infrastructure of these mobile networks, they are utilizing cloud platforms for storing the data of their subscribers, and all these same security mechanisms are applicable to mobile networks. So if someone wants to do research with areas, which areas can be worked on in cloud in terms of security, and how to test the solution on scalability?
Hello, sir. I have one doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, you're talking about a single sign-on, right? So
Yeah.
whenever we logged into the Gmail or Google account, we are
Yeah.
directed. We are simply redirected to the other applications which are offered by Google, like Google Photos, Google Drive, etc.
Yeah.
Which is also single sign-on, right?
Yeah. Right.
Sir, whenever we are, logging into the third-party website. At that time, they're asking whether you have Facebook account or Gmail account.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll prefer any one of that, either Facebook or Gmail.
Right.
It also
Right.
comes under the single sign-on.
Yeah, it comes under OpenAuth and OpenID Connect.
Okay, at that time, Gmail will share those SAML tokens to the third-party applications or not?
Right. So if you're logging with Google or logging with Facebook, so they are actually using OAuth in the backend. So what OAuth allows us, OAuth is basically an authorization standard, and it allows you to share your resources which are managed by Google or Facebook. So, for example, your application, any web application, they want to access your Google contacts. You can authorize that application to access your Google contacts on your behalf using OAuth. But if you just want to log in into any application with Google or Facebook, then we use OpenID Connect, which is a layer on top of OAuth. So how OpenID Connect works is that when you access any web application and click on login with Google or login with Facebook, it will send a request to the Google or Facebook's authentication server, and then it will render the Google's login page or the Facebook's login page, where you will enter your credentials. And once you enter the credential, it returns you a unique code, which is your authorization code grant. And using that code, you pass on that code to your application or the server, and the server then sends that same code back to the Google's authentication server, and that server returns an access token. And using that access token, the application can then uh, allow you to sign into your account. It can retrieve your user and profile information from Google, and it can authenticate you, or it can access any uh, resources which are managed by Google or Facebook. So your Facebook friend list, or Google contacts, or files in your Google Drive. So all these types of restricted information can be obtained by the third-party application.
For example, if that third-party application is a malicious website, in that case also even Gmail verifies whether that website is a malicious website or something
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. So whenever you want to use sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, you have to register with the Google Cloud or the Facebook's platform, and you have to actually get your application certified from Google or Facebook. So if
Okay,
you're offering any malicious application, and you are accessing all the users like personal information, or their file stored in Google Drive, or all their contacts. So Google, you will have to actually justify to Google why you are accessing this type of information, and only if they are satisfied, then they will enable your application to use OAuth.
that
And
means
still,
before
the
giving that
final
authentication,
responsibility is up to the user. So once you get the authorization screen
that
during the
means
OAuth
before
flow,
granting that authentication to us, so Google will verifies whether this website is a malicious or it is a perfect one.
so it verifies.
Okay.
But still, the final responsibility is on the user. So Google will not be held responsible in case of any data breach, because you are authorizing the application to access your restricted information.
Okay.
So, for example, if an application just wants you to log in with Google, but at the authorization screen, it is saying that they want to access your file stored in Google Drive, and want to have access to all your contacts,
Okay.
then that is not a right approach, because for login with Google, you just need your profile information. And if you actually authorize the application to access your files, then that's actually your mistake. It's not Google's or any other one's mistake. So both has to be used very carefully.
In general, most of the time we will click hello, hello, hello. We are not studying anything.
So OAuth has to be used very carefully. So if you go to your Google account, actually everyone should review all the authorizations they have provided to all other third-party applications, and what all permissions have been provided to those applications.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
So there's a question on what are the good topics in network security, cyber security for doing research. I think the area of cyber physical systems and IoT security and how to secure devices in a distributed environment, that's one of the active areas of research. And utilizing technologies like blockchain to secure your applications in a distributed environment. Those are active areas of research. So there's a question on some idea about blockchain technology. So actually, the topic of this session is security. Blockchain is a quite a big subject, and actually I've delivered a lot of FTPs. It's like if I talk about blockchain, it will take me more than 1 or 2 hours to talk about blockchain. So what is basic idea of blockchain is it's just a public ledger which stores all the information related to transactions on a blockchain network. And using this blockchain technology, we can build a trust within a set of nodes which are distributed, and they do not need to trust each other as such. There is no centralized authority involved in a blockchain network. So it helps in establishing trust through the use of various consensus mechanisms, like proof of work or proof of stake are the consensus mechanisms in blockchain. So there is a question on how to check whether applications installed are accessing our files in a laptop or mobile. Yeah, it's actually quite difficult. Like you can analyze the like network traffic moving in and out of your laptop or mobile, and if they are sending any sensitive information. But for a common user, it is very difficult. Mobile application may be running in background and sending all your contact information, or all your SMS messages may be sent to any server in the background, and you may never know. So it is very difficult for a common user unless you analyze all the network traffic and the information which is being transmitted over the wire. It is very difficult.
I have one more doubt. Is there any third-party applications which provides on-premises cloud? It's a kind of private cloud establishment in the college or campus. Is it easy thing or it's a difficult thing?
Yeah, definitely there are like many open source private cloud solutions where by which you can set up your own private cloud infrastructure, but it's only mostly meant for enterprise environments. For academic environments, it may be actually quite challenging to set up your own private cloud infrastructure. Like managing the infrastructure again is a big headache,
Okay.
and you have to constantly upgrade your infrastructure because your servers may fail, your hard disk may crash, there may be network issues, like instances may not be able to connect to other servers. So managing the infrastructure, upgrading the infrastructure, and keeping all the servers and infrastructure up to date with all the security patches, that's a big challenge.
Okay. What is the tool that is you said like open source tool? The name of the tool. What is that?
So there are many tools, for example, Eucalyptus, OpenStack,
Okay.
OwnCloud, all these tools are there. So there is a question on what about the data breach recently on Facebook and how to avoid such things. That's again the same thing which I discussed previously. How users are authorizing third-party applications to access their sensitive information. For example, on Facebook, there are many third-party applications like applications which can enhance your Facebook profile photos, or which can actually create some cartoons or some avatars out of your Facebook photos. So some users want to use such applications, and they authorize those applications to access their entire uh, profile photos, their all the photos uploaded, their profile information, and their Facebook posts. So you should be very careful while authorizing such access. So there's another question on how about deduplication and security in the cloud. So I think the area of what I understand from deduplication is that any duplicate records they should be removed. And how does it relate to security in the cloud? That I'm not sure. Like how deduplication and security are related. I'm not quite sure about that.
Morning, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Amuda. I have a question.
Yeah.
Suppose we are allowing all the apps to be installed in our phone and it is asking, do you allow to access the media? Or we have to specify allow. If it is not, if you are not specifying allow, it is not been installed and we are not able to use it. Whether
Yeah.
it is how can we avoid this type of issues, sir?
Yeah. So one thing is that you should download the applications only from a trusted source. So firstly, you should download, for example, on Android, the applications must be downloaded from Google Play Store only, or you should not directly download the applications from any other website like the APK files, because they may have some malware within them. And if you're authorizing the application to access certain restricted resource, or you are allowing them to access your location or files or your contacts, then you need to make sure that why this application is requesting certain type of information. And again, the principle of least privileges again applies to this area as well. So I discussed the area of least privileges. So you should initially assign the least number of permissions possible and see if your application still works. So, for example, the location permission need not be assigned to every application. And if an application is requesting your location, you just deny that request and see whether the application still works.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Yeah.
I'm having a query, like how the cyber security is used in satellite communication. Say, like I have recently read an article like Chatham paper. So in that, it was like China and Russia are focusing on using the cyber attacks as a part of their military and strategic doctrine. And even NATO has uncovered GPS jamming and other cyber security attacks. So how can I make it useful for authentication? Is there any kind of algorithms that have developed for the satellite communication?
Yeah, securing wireless communications, security is an important aspect of any type of wireless communication, whether it's satellite communication or mobile networks. And there are mechanisms in place for different types of wireless protocols, have their own security mechanisms are in place. So it depends. Like I'm not aware of satellite communication security aspects, but definitely like each type of wireless protocol has its own security mechanisms. But the issue you mentioned about these countries trying to initiate cyber attacks, it's not just related to the protocols themselves, they are also related to the physical infrastructure and the hardware which is being deployed. For example, there are certain companies from these countries which are selling 5G infrastructure, and many countries have banned those companies from deploying their 5G infrastructure. So United States recently they banned Huawei company from deploying 5G infrastructure in US. So that's because there are many security challenges or security concerns are there with respect to whether these physical equipment which is deployed by these companies, they may have certain backdoors open to their own Chinese servers. So even if you are using all these security mechanisms are there, but if there are some backdoors left within your hardware, they can still be sending data to their Chinese servers. So the same thing also applies to certain types of like mobile phones from certain companies. Like there have been cases where backdoors have been identified. They are sending their users' private information to their own Chinese servers. So
Have
even if they
listened,
are, yeah,
like I have heard that China is making use of quantum cryptography for its satellites. So like that, may I know what kind of cryptography our Indian system is using?
so that I'm not aware of which cryptography they are using for satellite communication, but that's not my area of research. But yeah, definitely the area of quantum computing changes a lot of things. So the traditional cryptographic algorithms they can easily be cracked using quantum computing. So any so to make your cryptography and algorithms future proof, you need to make them resistant to quantum computing attacks. Like they should not be able to crack those algorithms using quantum computing resources. So that's again an active area of research. Like quantum resistant cryptography is an active area of research.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
There's a question on when we have a hosting account, it will provide some applications, example Moodle, in managing our data on cloud, and it will provide some applications too. Are they secure on Linux hosting account? Yeah, I think Moodle is a very well-known application. So as long as your infrastructure is secure, there's no issue with such applications. So there's a question on what is the scope of research in this field. So cybersecurity is a quite active area of research. There are new security threats always coming up, and as I mentioned, like with quantum computing, a lot of things will change. So quantum resistant cryptography is an active area of research, and in distributed environments, again, security is an important aspect for IoT applications. So there's a question on if compressive sensing techniques can be applied to reduce the size of data for deduplication. Yeah, definitely they can be applied.
If there is any other question, participants may ask. Okay. Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session, and I hope we get to learn from you again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
It's great
accepting our
interacting with
invitation.
all of you. Yeah, thank you.
Dear participants, now we'll be taking a break till 12. I request everyone to please log in at 11:55, 5 minutes prior to 12, so that we can start the session in time. There was a query regarding the attendance link. Attendance link will be shared in the next session with all of you in the chat box.